So starting a couple years ago, I started using Thanksgiving as sort of my New Year's resolution time. I was always working on actual New Year's, so I'd usually spend Thanksgiving. Well, I guess I'm actually still working Thanksgiving. But I would spend this time of year basically to look back on the last year and see where I've gone and just think about what I want to do over the next year. Just kind of a way to assess my growth. And since this is a gaming channel, I decided that I would also think about a way that games have affected me and that they have helped me grow. Just to kind of help push that message about, positive impact of games on people's lives. They do more than just turn us into huge perverted mass murderers, is my point. So when I think about this last year, a year ago I directed Uncle Gareth. I directed this large-scale film for the first time, something that I had wrote with a couple people, but really took over the main writing on. We are still doing things with it because it's such a slow-burning process to actually see a film through to the end. So we're still doing the festival thing and all that. But over the last year, what I've really found myself doing more than before is I'm kind of writing more than I used to. And I think I might be sliding more into being more of a writer than an actor. I don't know. I just want to be making things that I like, and that has kind of turned into me writing a lot. Somebody asked me recently, what kind of things do I write? They're like, do you usually write comedy or drama? And I'm like, I hate those labels. I feel like a good drama should have a bit of comedy in it. I feel like a good comedy should still be grounded and make you care about the characters. And I hate the term dramedy, so I don't use that. I basically just try to describe things in ways other than, do I want you to cry or laugh at it? Because I feel like every scene has a different intention when it comes to that, There will always be elements of comedy in a good drama. There will always be elements of drama in a good comedy. It's just to make a good movie, to tell a good story. There's always a bit of both. Without fail, almost all of my scripts tend to be taking a bunch of characters and giving them slight twists on a central theme. And of course there are cinematic influences behind it, people like Wes Anderson. I don't really write his style. I have very different humor, and I build my characters in different ways, but that central idea of having an ensemble of characters kind of rotating around one theme is something that I find I put in a lot of things. But I also haven't really been into Wes Anderson until the last couple of years. I didn't watch a lot of movies growing up, so I learned my storytelling largely from the games that I played in middle school and high school, to be more specific. That's when I started actually taking an interest in that kind of thing, and the games that I played, I think, kind of reflected that. And I think a huge one for me was Final Fantasy VII. This is a game that pretty much everybody played around that time. This was probably the first blockbuster that games had, at least when it came to cinematics. Well, I guess there was Metal Gear Solid. I don't know, I'm not a historian. But it broke a lot of ground in terms of what you could do to tell a story in games. It was very ambitious, but most importantly, it had an ensemble of characters and a central theme, and it affected a lot of people because of this. There's a lot of debate now as to whether Final Fantasy VII is overrated and everything, but I don't care about that. To me, as a child, Final Fantasy VII was something that I wanted to play very badly, but I couldn't. We were very late to the PlayStation game. We really only had Nintendo consoles. I got a PlayStation 1 when the PlayStation 2 was almost over, and I got the PlayStation 2 when the PlayStation 3 was out. So I was really late to a lot of PlayStation games, but I would see it at my cousin's house, and I would play, the first couple hours of it over and over again whenever I went over there, and then I'd forget where my save file was, or they would delete it, or they'd lose the memory card. But I was always immediately pulled in, because it was just extremely well scripted. It starts off with you on a bombing mission to disrupt this nuclear reactor because you're helping out a team of environmental terrorists, basically, eco-terrorists. And it's funny because while I was talking, I now realize that that's actually a central theme that carries through the entire game. You start off with some people who are like, hey, we gotta stop these corporations from destroying the planet for personal gain. And then it turns into, hey, we gotta stop this guy from literally destroying the planet with a meteor. So, that's something. But the central theme of the game is loss. It's a pretty well-known story about Hironobu Sakaguchi having lost his mother briefly before, or while he was working on the game, I can't remember. Either way, he basically made the game about loss and about grief, and every character that you get revolves around that. Pretty much every character in the game is, and the planet itself is dealing with loss and grief. The main villain is dealing with the loss of his identity and then the loss of the mother that he didn't even know he had. The main character, Cloud, has lost his memory, he's lost his best friend, he loses the girl he likes, he loses pretty much everything throughout the course of it. And whenever anybody talks about Final Fantasy VII, they always talk about the scene where Aeris gets killed by Sephiroth as being this big emotional thing. And sure, that's a well-done scene, but it's not one of my favorites. My favorite scenes are the ones where all of the other characters that are with you get their development. When Barrett goes back to the slum town that he came from, and he goes looking for his best friend who he hasn't seen in forever, and he just sees what this horrible just place has done to him, and the person that he's become. And when Nanaki, or Red 13, who was captured and experimented on in a lab, finds out that the rest of his species was killed, and he finds his father. When Yuffie gets back to her hometown, and she spends her entire time trying to get the approval of her father and her people. Every character gets their moment to sort of explore their own loss and their own grief, and it's all different. They all feel it in different ways, and they all go about it in different ways. But it's all very effective. There's not a single character that's just there for no reason. And you know, you kind of take that for granted in movies now, but that was a first for games, and to me that was, and you know, it didn't just touch me. Two of my biggest friendships right now started with Final Fantasy VII. There's this story, I can't remember if I ever told it on this channel or not. Colby and I went to the same acting school. He went the year after me, so I was in my last year, he was in his first year. And he would just leave his door open because he was trying to meet people, but he didn't, you know, want to go out looking for them, sort of thing. And I lived across the hall from him. And so one day, I was feeling particularly good, I don't know why. And I went by, he had an open door, and I just poked in, I was like, hey, do you wanna go get some Subway? And he was like, yeah, sure. And so then we walked there, and the entire way there, we talked about Final Fantasy VII. I can't remember how we got on it. I think it was because it was what he was playing. He was playing something in his room, I believe. I remember. So we just spent the entire time talking about Final Fantasy VII and like our favorite parts of it, and that started this friendship that has now been going for 5 years, something like that. And he's also a writer, and I think that's also partially why the games that I care about, he also cares about largely. Things like The World Ends With You. And also one of my favorite memories of living in New York is when we played through Final Fantasy IX. I hadn't played it before, and he loved it. Played through that, and God, that might be better written than 7. I really like 9. And it's like a completely different story. Like, it's a completely different kind of, it's mind-boggling. Like, 7 is kind of, you know, it's a little more dystopian, science fiction sort of thing. Final Fantasy IX is just straight-up high fantasy. And it is so good and charming. It's the Princess Bride of video games, is the way I describe it to people. It's such a wonderful story. But then Tyler, another one of my best friends who I went to high school with back home, and he just moved out here a year ago. We stayed in touch all this time because of the connection we made in high school, and the connection we made in high school was largely based around Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII and Metal Gear Solid. Those were the two major games that we really connected on. When we play games we like, we go on largely about the writing. We just did that with Life is Strange. We just talk about that. We have really long, probably pretentious, not really useful conversations, but we enjoy them. And these two guys have provided some of the biggest pillars in my life. There are others, obviously, but these two in particular came from Final Fantasy VII, so they're the ones that matter right now. And right now, we're also all living in an apartment together. We're just this enclave of people who have an easier time talking to people through video games than alcohol and parties, I guess, is the general theme of this apartment. I'm finishing up some feature film scripts now, which is nerve-wracking because I haven't done anything on that scale before, but I'm doing it with two stories that I'm really passionate about, and I'm just touching them up and trying to carry this theming through, and just keep in mind all these lessons that I've learned from not just movies, but also video games, like Final Fantasy VII and 9, from The Last of Us, from Life is Strange now I gotta go through and make sure I'm subtly telling stories as well as just blatantly telling stories, because Life is Strange did that really good, and really well. I need to say really well. If I say really good, it means I'm a bad writer. Anyway, guys, that's my Thanksgaming for the year. Thank you for listening, and feel free to share any stories that you have about either just about like your growth over the last year, or about how a game has touched you in the last year, or how about just a game has mattered. Right now, we're in kind of a, if not scary, at least extremely weird and uncomfortable place in a lot of major places, particularly Britain and the US, which is, hey, where almost all of my viewers come from. So I really want to focus on just trying to spread positivity, and so let's let these comments be that. So here's to another year of growth and games. Happy Thanksgiving, guys.